All right.
I really appreciated listening to that conversation. A lot of energy, a lot of different ideas. That was encouraging. And it feeds right into the devotion that I've been thinking a lot about. Because what you all have come to know about me is that I'm constantly trying to find out what God is saying about what we have as a desire of our hearts to be a multi-ethnic gathering of people. And the verse that I've been thinking a lot about comes out of Romans 12. And I'm just going to read verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And we have to come to grips with the fact that over the years of our development, we have very much been catering to the whims of the world, especially around these issues of race. We've been conditioned, we've been socialized, we've been developing our internalized messages based upon how the world says we should do this. But God is letting us know in these verses that we have to think differently. And something that you said, Kyle, really stood out for me in that we have to own the fact that people have differing, probably even controversial attitudes about the church now. And to have a listening session, on that flyer that says, we're Mosaic and we're new in the neighborhood, and we want to learn how to start having some real open, honest dialogue about what God says about his community of believers and people who want to gather together on Sunday. And so we want to just invite you over to have a listening session and give people a place to kind of express some of their encouragements, discouragements, likes, dislikes. Now, I'll be the first to say that this could not be the safest situation to engage in, because I'm certain that there would be people that would have some very controversial things to say. But it's high time that the church start listening to the pain of people's hearts that the church has caused, and to be able to become a safe place where people can say, this is how I was hurt. And so I would not even give this admonition if I don't hurriedly say, this is something we need to be doing some serious praying about. But I kind of want to believe that Mosaic is going to be one of those group of people who's willing to tackle the hard issues that society has for us to tackle. So we just have to really, really seek God's wisdom as to how to do what we are wanting to do, and keep verses like this in our mind. And I'm going to read it again so that we can leave with these thoughts. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. And right away, when I read that, I say to myself, so we cannot be thinking if we build it, they'll come. Because that is one of the ways that the world thinks. And then be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So to be constantly allowing the Spirit of God to challenge what's on our minds in this regard and looking for renewal personally. And then we'll be able to test and approve God's will, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So that's Romans 2, and something for you to reflect on this week, and something to be thinking about. Okay, God, we believe that you have placed a burden on our hearts to do this more in a way that you would be pleased. So give us wisdom, give us courage, and put some gasoline on our fire.
Thanks, Victoria. All right, well, we're gonna jump into our Bible study here. So we're still going through the book of Matthew, and if we're in Matthew 11 today, if you want to open up your Bible or pull it up on your phone. Matthew 11, and we're going to start in verse 1. For those of you that are newer, or if you're watching this online, we've been going through Matthew, and whenever the word kingdom is used, we stop. We stop with the word kingdom, and the word kingdom is used 52 times in the book of Matthew, and we're really looking at what this idea is of the kingdom is an eternal place. When we accept Christ as our Savior, we know we'll be in the kingdom of heaven for eternity. But it's this really, I don't know the word, this bizarre, outstanding, amazing, strange thing where Jesus says that kingdom of heaven, this eternal place, I want you to bring it here. I want you to bring it to this this earth, to this place, to this community. And so we're looking as a team of what that looks like, what those kingdom values are, and what would it look like for us as Mosaic Church to be a part of bringing that eternal kingdom of heaven here to Grand Rapids. So verse 1, after Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to, hang on, I'm going to fix this for our Zoom watchers. Okay. He went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John, so speaking of John the Baptist, when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Now, I want you to think of a time in your life where struggle of any kind rocked your faith. So I'm not going to ask you to share because that's pretty vulnerable stuff. But think of a time in your life when struggle rocked your faith, where struggle to the point of going, "Okay, Jesus, are you even real? If you were real, then I wouldn't be going through this struggle. Because you would care about me enough to change the struggle, to change these circumstances, a circumstance that dramatic that you've gone through before." So John the Baptist, who we've read about a little bit in Matthew so far, he was the first person that said, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." He's in prison now. He's in prison, and he sends his disciples in verse 2 to go to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come? Are you the Messiah? Now, why is John asking if Jesus is really the Messiah when John's whole life ministry up to this point has been proclaiming what? What's John been proclaiming up to this point? That Jesus is, it's a Sunday school answer, you can say it. He's the Messiah. John the Baptist is going around telling everybody, Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah. Now he's sending his disciples to Jesus going, "Are you really the Messiah?" Why do you think John's saying that? He's in prison. His circumstances are different. He's thinking, how could I be in prison if Jesus is the Messiah? Does that make sense? And there was a lot of first century Jewish mentality built upon the Old Testament that when the Messiah came, particularly because they were captives of Rome. So the first century Jews were not free people. They had their little pet government, their little pet kingdom, but the power was in Rome. They paid tremendous unjust taxes to Rome. They were under Rome's thumb. They didn't have their own king. They didn't have their own kingdom. And they thought when the Messiah came, And it really matches a lot of the prophecy in the Old Testament that we attribute to Jesus' second coming. They were attributing to Jesus' first coming, that when he came, he was going to be a king just like King David. You guys remember King David? He was a warrior king, and he took out the enemy, and he had his earthly kingdom. And John's thinking, if Jesus were really the Messiah, I wouldn't be in prison. We would be taken out Rome. Caesar should be the one in prison, right? Okay, so think about in your own life a situation like that. Now, if you're Jesus, how would you respond? How would you respond to John's disciples who are asking him this question? So that's the answer we get in verse 4. Jesus says, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. So Jesus goes through this list of check boxes. The Old Testament prophecies had prophecies about what the Messiah would do. And Jesus is saying, I've checked those boxes. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear. It's like check, 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 Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. And in verse 6, here's what he says to John. There's a lot of subtle personal message here in verse 6. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. That's another way of saying to John, I'm the Messiah and you're still in prison. Okay? Both of those things can be true at the same time. In John's head, they can't be true at the same time. If Jesus is the Messiah, I can't be in prison. And Jesus is saying, I am the Messiah and you can be in prison. We need to get our head. There's a message in that for us today, right? I mean, even just outside of us as a church plant, bringing the kingdom here, I'm talking about our own lives, our own struggles. We have this idea that if Jesus is the Messiah, then I can't be in prison for his faith, by the way. It wasn't like he committed a crime just as a deviant. He's in prison for his faith, for ways he was standing up against Herod and all kinds of injustices, really. He was standing for. So John's in prison, and these first few verses, I mean, Matthew's trying to get his audience to realize Jesus is the Messiah. Messiah, Messiah, Messiah. This whole text is about Jesus being the Messiah. Messiah meaning the anointed one. So Christ is just a Greek word for Messiah. Messiah is just a Hebrew word for anointed one. Anointed one is the one of the Old Testament talks about that's coming, God in the flesh, coming to save us. So this is the scene. This is the conversation so far. That's the message going back to John. So verse 7, as John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in king's palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Again, he's talking about John here. A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you. So again, very messianic. The Old Testament said there's a messenger coming before the Messiah. Jesus says that messenger is John the Baptist, even though he's in prison. That's who he is. Verse 11, truly I tell you, among those born of women, okay, picture who that is. That's everybody that's ever been born. Okay, right? He's like, okay, Jesus, got it. Everyone born of women. They're right. Yes, exactly. He's like, badoom. There has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Whoa! Listen to the words Jesus is using to describe John. Out of anyone ever born of women, nobody's greater than John. Who this whole time, remember, is in prison. It's like you could add that after every line of this. Who's in prison? Who's in prison? Who's in prison? You know, in your theology, you can think about something about God and then say, even though, I'm in prison, or like, these two things are weighing against each other through this whole conversation. And then this total whoa line comes next. about the kingdom. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than John the Baptist. Okay? What on earth is Jesus talking about? John is the greatest person ever born of women, but whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than John the Baptist. All right, so a couple of things going on here. When he says that among anyone born of women, there's nobody greater than John the Baptist, he's talking about everyone up to that point, all of your Old Testament. So think of your favorite people from the Old Testament. Who are some of your favorite Old Testament, I don't say characters, but your favorite Old Testament people, who are they? Joseph. Who else? David, Moses, Ruth. Who else?
The one who never dies and lives like a bazillion years.
Well, Methuselah lives a long time. He died, but yes.
Okay, I'm with him.
Enoch didn't die. You could go with Enoch.
Okay. I don't know, just like went up.
But pretty great, right? Enoch didn't die. Elijah went up in a chariot. Deborah, I heard. Deborah over here.
Yes.
Esther. Samson. Okay, so guess who's greater than all those people? John the Baptist.
John the Baptist.
He's great. John the Baptist. Exactly, Josh. Jesus says, there's actually a right answer to this. Who's greater than all those people? John the Baptist is greater. Jesus said he was greater. And why? Because he's the one preparing the way for the Messiah. Like the point is, your whole Old Testament points to Jesus. There's a line I'm stealing from the Bible Project, which is really good, by the way, if you're looking for a podcast, Bible Project. The Bible is a unified story pointing to Jesus. That's what the Bible is. And Jesus is making that point right here. The whole Old Testament points to Jesus, the one who comes right before Jesus, John. He's the greatest of any of the prophets in the whole Old Testament. John is the greatest. And now there's a switch flip. Now it's time for the kingdom of heaven. So that was the Old Testament. It was pointing towards Jesus. Now that Jesus is here, we have this kingdom of heaven we're talking about. That wasn't a concept in the Old Testament. What was the kingdom in the Old Testament? Don't be shy, you know it. What was the kingdom? King who? Who's your famous kings in the Old Testament? You already said some of them. King David, Solomon. That was the kingdom, right? It was the kingdom of Israel. And then you had the kingdom of Judah. Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven. Totally different kingdom. Totally different set of rules. Whoever's least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than anybody from the kingdom of Israel. That's what we're inviting people into. And as we look at the kingdom of heaven, it's a very upside down kingdom. It's not about military might. It's not about political power. It's not about power and prestige. It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. And it was a really big deal that this kingdom was available to everybody. It was a really big deal that this kingdom was available to Gentiles. It was available to Romans. It was available to Samaritans. And as we work on being a multi-ethnic church here that has racial equity, those are kingdom values, because those values really only pertain to Jesus' kingdom. All other kingdoms of the world have to do with power and hierarchy and who has power over others. Jesus' kingdom is about him, and anyone in this kingdom, even the least in this kingdom, is considered great. So this is the kingdom that we're involved with bringing here to this place. So verses 12 and 13, they're kind of obscure. They have to do with the persecution of the prophets and the persecution of the Christians, of first Christians. In fact, the persecution of John himself. John's in prison. He's about to be beheaded. That's later in the gospel narrative. Jesus is just saying, in this kingdom on this earth, there's violence. Violent people are attacking this kingdom. John is one of them that's being attacked. Verse 14, if you're willing to accept it, John is the Elijah who was to come. That's a very specific Old Testament prophecy that Elijah would come before Jesus would come back. It's one of the reasons Jews reject Jesus as Messiah, because they say Elijah hasn't came yet. And Jesus says, John is the Elijah figure, that's John, coming before the Messiah comes. Very specific, Jesus saying, I am the Messiah. And really, this is one of the first time, at least in Matthew, that Jesus comes out openly and says, I'm the Messiah. I'm the chosen one of Israel. I'm the one the Old Testament points towards. This is ultimately what gets him killed. All right, so let's keep going. We'll go through until the end of verse 19. To what can I compare this generation? So we're talking about the first century Jews that are seeing the Messiah for the first time. They are like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others. We played the pipe for you, and you did not dance. These are kind of confusing verses. We're going to pause there. If you played a pipe in the first century, picture anyone like Celtic music here? I do. It's just random, like it'll come on the radio or with just randomly, and Sage in my back seat. What does Sage do immediately when she hears Celtic music? She starts dancing, just like that. You can't really not dance when you hear Celtic music. Okay, you get the point? Like the fiddle and the pipes and whatever they're playing, it's just like it's time to dance, right? Okay, that's what Jesus is saying here. We played the pipe for you, but you did not dance. So the Messiah coming should have been the most exciting, dance-worthy event ever in history. And yet they didn't dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn. So a dirge would be a funeral song. And we connect here what he's talking about in verses 18 and 19. He connects it to John the Baptist. He said, so in verse 18, John, he didn't come eating or drinking. And they said he has a demon. So remember, what was John eating? Locusts and honey, right? And they're looking at John saying, why aren't you dancing? You should be, you have a demon. John, you should be dancing. If you're really the Elijah, if you're really the one who's to come before Jesus, you should be celebrating. And we sang a dirge, Jesus is comparing that to John's ministry, that there was a sense of, John didn't come in this celebratory way. Basically, people were responding to there's a hypocritical response that the people have. To John, they're pointing at him saying, you should be eating and drinking. Jesus came eating and drinking. He came to bring the party. And in verse 19, they said, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. They pointed at Jesus and called him a glutton. They pointed at Jesus and called him a drunkard because he was eating and drinking with sinners. He was coming to bring this new kingdom that they weren't interested in. The point of all this, again, it's a little bit, there's a lot kind of Jesus is doing in the text here with symbolism and you think it's this way, but it's really this way. You think it's this way, but it's really this way. The point is, and this would go back to verse 11, our kingdom point here, as we look at this kingdom that we are involved in bringing to this place, it is a backwards kingdom. The people were understanding it. The people couldn't grab that. When they were supposed to be dancing, they were pointing at the one dancing saying, that's a fool. When they were supposed to be mourning, they were saying, that's a demon. Why are they mourning? Why aren't they dancing? It was like whatever the worldly system of the world was, Jesus was turning it on its head. This kingdom was meant to be for everyone, but that was not a message that people wanted to hear. That was the dance that Jesus came to bring. This is for everyone. This is for the tax collectors. This is for, the sinners, which would be just a broad range of these non-religious people. And the religious people said, we don't want to be involved in that dance. We don't want a part of that dance. For time's sake, I'm going to kind of wrap it up here, but I do want you to think about what are the applications of that for today? Who are the religious people today? who would fall under, and we won't share it out loud because I don't want to categorize groups of people. There were these categories used for sinners, tax collectors, but who are the people today that don't fit in church? People that don't fit in religious settings. Those were the people Jesus was hanging out with. Those are the people Jesus was spending time with. It's not to guilt us or shame us. It's to broaden our horizon of who's invited to this party, right? And I love this because it is a party. It's eating and it's drinking and it's dancing, and that's the kingdom of God. Even the metaphor for heaven, often used in Matthew, is a banquet. It's a feast. And a Jewish banquet, it wasn't just like we're eating pizza. I mean, this was dancing, and it would have been days upon days upon days of food and of wine and of dancing. It was a festival. Think of the biggest festival you've ever seen that goes on for days and days and days. That's the image of the kingdom of heaven. What Jesus is trying to get us to do is to widen out the types of people that get invited to that kingdom. Does that make sense? So just reflect on that for a minute. I'll give you just a minute to reflect on that. Yeah, let's just take a minute. Think about in your life in Grand Rapids, in our context today, who would Jesus be hanging out with? And who is he inviting us to bring into this upside down kingdom? As God brings people to mind, we are going to switch over to our prayer groups right now. I personally enjoy, where's my screen here? I'm going to give April the mic here just to give us some, I'm trying hard to not touch any buttons on these darn things. Like they are. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Don't touch any buttons on those things. Adriel's just going to give us some words of encouragement as we approach prayer. And honestly, this is, we need a pep talk sometime, even for the church plant. The church plant, we've been chugging along. We've been doing a lot of work. There's more work to do. When it comes to the kingdom, we need a pep talk. And so Adriel's just going to give us a couple thoughts of encouragement, and then we'll break back into our groups for prayer.
Well, we are thankful again for the word of God and for our pastor of giving us some food for thought, for sure. Definitely some food for thought. And the excitement in our minds of this idea of the feast. I heard everybody talk about, everybody likes to eat. I like to eat too. So just the idea that we have this opportunity to eat, let it encourage us. And also, when the flute is played, let's dance. Mm-hmm. Let's remember that we have a reason to celebrate with all the things that are going on around us that may seem to bog us down. And we do need to rest here and there, but we have a reason to celebrate. And we should be certainly mindful of that. And if we are, for those of us that are struggling, because sometimes it's true that no matter how good we think we have it, that we think we have it together, if we're honest with ourselves, we could admit, I don't always feel like dancing when the flute plays. And I need a little bit of help getting my feet going. And so we have permission to go to the chief musician in prayer, who will start playing that Celtic music. or whatever the music is. For me, it's salsa merengue that just really get my feet moving. Whatever that music is, you need to hear at that time. The chief musician, when we go to him in prayer, we'll start playing that music that will get us moving, despite whatever the world has for us at that time. So as you think about the things that come to our minds, including our pies, the folk we're trying to bring in, and the folk that we're trying to bring in, all the folk born of women, and how we make a difference in this neighborhood, some of the places that we've driven by, that we'll drive by on our way out. What is our thought process towards addressing and interacting with those people and those communities, as well as just being intentional, continuing to stay focused in the word. That's our number one thing. How do we stay focused and true to the word, knowing that if we do that, everything else is going to come the way it's supposed to.
All right, go ahead and break up into our groups from before. It is noon. If you got to go, totally understand. We're going over time. If you're able to stick around for prayer, we'll just rejoin our circles and be in prayer for your 5 pie people. Upcoming events at Mosaic. I will mention too, I had this in my notes earlier and forgot to mention it. If we didn't pass them around, but if you haven't turned in a connection card before, it'd be great to have you turn one in just to get you in our system. We have our giving cards over here. I think everybody here knows about giving. I will just say this: if you're not giving monthly, totally okay. Like I don't get nosy in your giving and how you give and why, but just know it does help as we're trying to set up a budget right now. The people that are giving monthly, so you just click like recurring, that's the biggest help to us right now as we try to figure out a budget for expenses going forward. So just want to mention that if it's something you can go, I could set up something monthly. That would help us out. And if not, it is totally okay. And all those options are right there on the card. So, all right, break up into your group and let's go to prayer.